The J.W. Williams Funeral Directors have been proudly serving the people of this community since 1918. Service is our motto. The poor, the rich, the middle class and all are given the best of care and attention at all times. You have the privilege to select what you want. In your time of need, contact the capable, the competent, and the dependable staff of the J.W. Williams Funeral Home who is genuinely concerned with your care. At J.W. Williams Funeral Home, you are aptly served by the proprietor president, Deacon Arthur L. Parker, who continues the traditions and values set forth by the past president, Dr. Napoleon Williams. Your announcements for the J.W. Williams Funeral Home Sunday morning program are Deacon Arthur L. Parker, Reverend Isaac H. Owens, Mrs. Calandra Wilkerson Parker, Minister Frankie Harmon, Ms. Sandra Johnson, and Deacon Earl Clark, Jr.
Thank you, and good morning, friends. We come to you this morning to bring announcements, dedications, and songs. We certainly hope that your day may be brighter after listening to our program. The following family would like to thank their many friends for the food, the flowers, the condolences, and all other expressions of sympathy and kindness shown to them during their hours of sorrow and bereavement during the past week. United States Army veteran, Mr. Sammy John Balaam, Sr., age 98, of 130 Wolf View Court, Southwest Atlanta, Georgia, died Friday, December 1st at Autumn Grieve Hospice Center in Marietta, Georgia. The funeral service for United States Army veteran Mr. Sammy John Balaam, Sr., age 98, was held Friday, December 8th, in the sanctuary of the Zion Hill Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia. The pastor, Dr. Aaron L. Parker, officiated. The burial with military honors was held Saturday, December 9th, at the Mount Olive Baptist Church Cemetery in Abbeville, Georgia. His beloved godson, the Reverend Albert W. Holmes, officiated. Survivors include his loving and devoted children, Mrs. Gloria Jean Balaam Reed of Delray Beach, Florida, Mrs. Elvesta Balaam Sewell of Lithium Springs, Georgia, and Mr. Sammy John Balaam Jr. and his wife, Mrs. Linda Balaam of Atlanta, Georgia. His beloved godson, the Reverend Albert W. Holmes, and his wife, Mrs. Earlene Holmes of Stone Mountain, Georgia. 7 beloved grandchildren, 12 great-grandchildren, 1 sister-in-law, Mrs. Patricia Balaam of Lakeland, Florida. A host of beloved nieces, nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. United States Army veteran, Mr. Sammy John Balaam, Sr., age 98, of 130 Wolfview Court, Southwest Atlanta, Georgia. Again, the family would like to thank our many friends for all of the many kindnesses shown to them during their hours of sorrow and bereavement during the past week. May God bless each of you is their prayer. The J.W. Williams funeral directors, serving Cordele and Vienna, were in charge of this arrangement during the past week. And now, it is certainly with the deepest regret that we make the following announcements. Mr. Xavier Alexander Sims, age 27, of 178 Hopper Subdivision, Americus, Georgia, died Thursday, December 7th, at his residence in Americus, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted mother, Mrs. Wybette Brown of Americus, Georgia, his loving and devoted father, Mr. Alexander Sims of Americus, Georgia, his loving sisters, Miss Michaela Sims of Vienna, Georgia, Mr. Maya Sims of Americus, Georgia, his beloved brother, Mr. Kaya Sims and Mr. DeMarco Cross, both of Americus, Georgia, his loving and devoted grandmother, Miss Mary Hurley of Americus, Georgia, his loving aunts and uncles, Mrs. Deborah Milledge, Miss Vivian Colbert, Mr. David Brown, Miss Shirley Hurley, all of Americus, Georgia, Miss Beverly Brown of DeSoto, Georgia, Mr. Terry Brown and his wife, Mrs. Sandra Brown of Concord, North Carolina, and Mr. Tony Brown of Cobb, Georgia. A host of beloved cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends, to include Mr. Cale Hurley, Mr. Cody Hurley, and Mr. Pat Davis, all of Americus, Georgia, survived Mr. Xavier Alexander Sims, age 27, of 178 Hopper Subdivision, Americus, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Xavier Alexander Sims, age 27, will be announced at a later date pending the completion of the arrangements. Mrs. Bernadine Green King, age 61, of 3338 Beauty Berry Way, Lithonia, Georgia, formerly of Americus, Georgia, died Wednesday, December 6th at the Emory Hilldale Hospital in Lithonia, Georgia. Survivors include her loving and devoted husband, Mr. Dennis James King of Lithonia, Georgia, her loving and devoted children, Mrs. Brittany A. Frazier and her husband, Mr. Brian Frazier, Mrs. Brianna D. Conyer and her husband, Mr. Damian Conyer, and Mr. Britton J. King and his wife, Mrs. Janae King, all of Lithonia, Georgia. 5 beloved grandchildren, her loving and devoted mother, Mrs. Mary Lee Green Holmes of Americus, Georgia. 2 beloved sisters, Mrs. Laverne Gaston of Albany, Georgia, and Mrs. Margie L. Johnson and her husband, Mr. Gregory Johnson of Americus, Georgia. A beloved brother, Mr. Calvin L. Holmes of Americus, Georgia. Her beloved uncle, Mr. Curtis Gaston of Atlanta, Georgia. A beloved aunt, Mrs. Ella Mae Smith Gaston of Chicago, Illinois. Her loving in-laws, Mr. Henry King Jr. and his wife, Mrs. Diane King of Ellaville, Georgia. Mr. Emmanuel King of Warner Robins, Georgia. Mr. Calvin King of Lithonia, Georgia, and Mrs. Carol Campbell and her husband, the Reverend Albert Campbell, all of Americus, Georgia. A host of beloved nieces, nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends, to include her best friend, the Reverend Susie Tatum of Tuskegee, Alabama, survived Mrs. Bernadine Green King, age 61, of 3338 Beauty Berry Way, Lithonia, Georgia, formerly of Americus, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Bernadine Green King, age 61, will be held Saturday, December 16th at 10 a.m. graveside at Eastview Cemetery in Americus, Georgia. The Reverend Susie Tatum will officiate. The public visitation will be Friday, December 15th from 1 until 5 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Mr. DeQuavius Tremont Cleckley, age 20, of 1366 Dayspring Trace, Lawrenceville, Georgia, died Saturday, November 11th at Wells Star North Fulton Hospital in Lawrenceville, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted mother, Mrs. Dayon Williams Cleckley of Lawrenceville, Georgia, his loving and caring father, Mr. Damian Cleckley of West Henrietta, New York, his beloved sisters, Mrs. Danalia T. Cleckley of Lawrenceville, Georgia, Ms. Donna L. Cleckley of West Henrietta, New York, and Mrs. Devar T. Winslow of Goldsboro, North Carolina. A beloved brother, Mr. Detravius Cleckley, his loving grandparents, Mrs. Annette Watts Williams of Leslie, Georgia, and Mr. O.C. Williams of DeSoto, Georgia, Mrs. Sherry Sapp Cleckley of Camilla, Georgia, and Mr. Maurice R. Cleckley of Americus, Georgia. His beloved uncle, Mr. Oscar Williams III of DeSoto, Georgia, and Mr. Derinsky T. Cleckley of Atlanta, Georgia. A host of cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survived Mr. DeQuavius Tremaine Cleckley, age 20, of 1366 Dayspring Trace, Lawrenceville, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. DeQuavius Tremaine Cleckley, age 20, will be announced at a later date, pending the recovery of his beloved mother. Mrs. Shamika LaShawn Reese Hardiman, age 45, of 306 West 17th Avenue, Cordele, Georgia, died Sunday, December 3rd at the Chris Regional Hospital in Cordele, Georgia. Survivors include her loving and devoted husband, Mr. Dwayne Hardiman of Cordele, Georgia, her loving and devoted children, Mr. Courtney Reese, Mr. Zabrian Reese, Mr. Dwayne Hardiman Jr., Mr. Kentravius Hardiman and his wife, Mrs. Jaleesa Hardiman, Mrs. Shanika Hardiman, and Mr. D'Angelo Hardiman, all of Cordele, Georgia, Mr. Keontae Hardiman of Lithonia, Georgia, 13 beloved grandchildren, her loving and devoted mother, Mrs. Sally B. Reese of Cordele, Georgia, her loving and caring father, Mr. Winford Crawford of Cordele, Georgia, her loving sisters, Mrs. Erica Tyson of Warner Robins, Georgia, Mrs. Monica Brady and her husband, Mr. Johnny Brady of Conyers, Georgia, Miss Tanya Whitaker, Miss Crystal Whitaker, and Miss Tiffany Reese, all of Cordele, Georgia. A beloved brother, Mr. Herbert Whitaker, and his wife, Mrs. Jennifer Whitaker of Cordele, Georgia. Her beloved aunts and uncles, a host of nieces, nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mrs. Shamika LaShawn Reese Hardiman, age 45, of 306 West 17th Avenue, Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Shamika LaShawn Reese Hardiman, age 45, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. Mrs. Barbara Owens Peterson, age 75, of Rochester, New York, died Wednesday, November 29th in Rochester, New York. The funeral service for Mrs. Barbara Ann Owens Peterson, age 75, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. Mrs. Gwendolyn Reed Sellers, age 64, of 237 Irvinville Road, Abbeville, Georgia, died Friday, December 8th at Atrium Navison Health Medical Center in Macon, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Gwendolyn Reed Sellers, age 64, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. Miss Carlita Elaine Lewis, age 61, of 1317 Drayton Road, Cordele, Georgia, died Saturday, December 9th at the Piedmont Medical Center in Macon, Georgia. Survivors include her loving and devoted children, Mrs. Tamika Hardiman and her husband, Mr. Craig Hardiman, Miss Tiffany Lewis, Miss Shaquita Hill, and Mr. Carlos Lewis, all of Cordele, Georgia. 9 beloved grandchildren, 3 great-grandchildren, her loving and devoted sisters, Mrs. Valerie Allman and her husband, Deacon Randall Allman of Vienna, Georgia, Miss Sonia Watkins of Albany, Georgia, and Miss Tammy Lewis of Cordele, Georgia. A host of devoted cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Miss Carlita Elaine Lewis, age 61, of 1317 Drayton Road, Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Miss Carlita Elaine Lewis, age 61, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. Mrs. Alberta Brown Trotman of 302 West 15th Avenue, Cordele, Georgia, died Saturday, November 9th on her 97th birthday at her residence in Cordele, Georgia. Survivors include her loving and devoted children, Ms. Joyetta Keel of Miami, Florida, Ms. Mary Terry and her husband, Brother Albert Terry of Cordele, Georgia, Ms. Joanne Rivers and her husband, Mr. Gregory Rivers of Warner Robins, Georgia, Mr. Abraham Trotman Jr. and his wife, Mrs. Carolyn Trotman, Mr. James Trotman, and Miss Katrina McKenzie, all of Cordele, Georgia. A host of beloved grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren. Her loving sister, Mrs. Barbara Mitchell, and her husband, Sir Freddie Mitchell, a host of devoted nieces, nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mrs. Alberta Brown Troutman, age 97, of 302 West 15th Avenue, Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Alberta Brown Troutman, age 97, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. Beloved pastor, the Reverend Leonard Boston, age 76, of 951 Pleasant Valley Road, Vienna, Georgia, died Saturday, December 9, 2023, at the Chris Regional Hospital in Cordele, Georgia. He is survived by his loving and devoted wife, Mrs. Lucille Boston of Vienna, Georgia. A complete listing of Reverend Leonard Boston's family will be announced at a later date. The funeral service for beloved pastor, the Reverend Leonard Boston, age 76, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. The J.W. Williams Funeral Directors, serving Cordele and Vienna, are in charge of each of these arrangements during this week. Friends, that conclude our funeral notices for this morning. And as always, we do remind you concerning our pre-funeral arrangements planning available at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home, with packages available with a single pay, a 3-year pay, a 5-year pay, and a 10-year pay. So please stop by and talk with us concerning your pre-funeral arrangements needs available at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. And also whole life insurance is available at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. And now for announcements.
I don't care. I guess you know, something ain't gonna leave you, just learn how to modify it.
Friendship Baptist Church, Highway 195 North, DeSoto, Leslie, Georgia. Annual Senior Citizen Appreciation Day will be today, Sunday, December 10th at 11 a.m. Everyone is invited to attend and dinner will be served. Sister Rosemary Sims, Program Director, Deacon Oscar Cooks, Chairman of Deacons, and the Reverend James Thomas, Pastor. The New Jerusalem Baptist Church, 281 Mass Road, Americus, Georgia, will observe their Christmas program today at 3 p.m. Everyone is invited to attend. Deacon Charles Furlow, Chairman of Deacons, the Reverend Tony Smith is the pastor. The Lincoln Douglas Memorial Association, Americas and Sumter County community will observe the 161st celebration of the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation Monday, January 1st, 2024 at 11 a.m. Whole Truth International Ministry, 502 South Lee Street, Americus, Georgia, will be the host church. The Reverend Rob Hubbard, pastor of the Big Bethel Baptist Church of Americus, Georgia, will deliver the emancipation message. Everyone is invited to attend. Deacon James L. Bryant and the Reverend Odenia Coleman committee and the Reverend George F. Muntz, host pastor. The McAfee Grove Baptist Church, Highway 19 North, Leesburg, Georgia, invites everyone to worship with them. Family night, Tuesday at 7 p.m. Small class, Thursday at 7 p.m. Sunday morning worship at 9 a.m. You may join them by calling 425-436-6341, 425-436-6341. The code is 708058. The code 708058. Minister Trawanda Daniels, Church Secretary, Dr. Robert L. Morgan, Pastor, McAfee Grove Baptist Church, Highway 19 North, Leesburg, Georgia. The New Corinth Baptist Church, Hooksville Road, Leslie, Georgia, invites everyone to worship with them each third Sunday at 10 a.m. Deacon Johnny Griffin, Chairman of Deacons, and the Reverend Carl Smith is the pastor. The Davis Chapel CME Church of Araby, Georgia, annual guest day will be held today, Sunday, December 10th at 10 a.m. The Reverend Dejon Griggs will deliver the morning message and dinner will be served. Steward Ruby Barrett, Chairman of Stewards, and the Reverend A. Wilburn is the pastor. The public is invited to celebrate the new television program, Our Global Family, on today, Sunday, December 10th, 2023 at 3 p.m. in the Clara Scott Community Clubhouse. The TV show will premiere later that same day on Zondra TV Network, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV. This TV show is a part of a broader movement to reunite families and restore family values, sponsored by and directed by ML Bill Consulting, LLC, CEO Mary L. Bill, in collaboration with Connecting Souls to Soul, CEO Millie McDay Woods. Please join them and get a backstage viewing of Our Global Family TV show with debut director Mary Beal with executive producer Zondra Evans, founder and CEO of Zondra TV Network. That will be today, December 10th at 3 p.m. in the Clara Scott Community Clubhouse. CEO Mary L. Bill, sponsor. The Gospel Travelers of Oakfield, Georgia, 59th anniversary will be Sunday, December 17th at the Warwick Community Center, 111 Dogwood Street, Warwick, Georgia. On program, the Georgia Boys of Meigs, Georgia, Precision and Brothers in Christ of Albany, Georgia, Truly Blessed of Albany, Georgia, the Gospel Stars of Lilly, Georgia, the Gospel Kings of Warner Robins, Georgia, Chosen Voices of Ideal, Georgia. The door open at 4 p.m. The program starts at 5 p.m. The admission is free. The Gospel Travelers of Oakfield, Georgia, 59th anniversary will be Sunday, December 17th at the Warwick Community Center, 111 Dogwood Street, Warwick, Georgia. On program, the Georgia Boys of Meigs, Georgia, Precision and Brothers in Christ of Albany, Georgia, Truly Blessed of Albany, Georgia, the Gospel Stars of Lilly, Georgia, the Gospel Kings of Warner Robins, Georgia, Chosen Voices of Idea, Georgia. The doors open at 4 p.m. The program starts at 5 p.m. Admission is free. Everyone is invited. The Beulah Land Baptist Church Gospel Choir inaugural Christmas concert will be Sunday, December 17th at 2 p.m. Everyone is invited to attend. Deacon Willie Smith, Chairman of Deacons, Dr. Dwayne Daniels, Pastor. The annual Emancipation Proclamation Service for Chris County will be observed Monday, January 1st, 2024 at 11 a.m. The Emmanuel Missionary Baptist Church will be the host church. Dr. T.C. Boone, Pastor Faith Perfection Life Center, Warner Robins, Georgia, will deliver the message. Everyone is invited. The Cordele Chris County branch of the NAACP annual Freedom Fund Banquet will be Saturday, January 13, 2024 at Blackshear Place Event Center. Tickets are on sale now. For more information and for tickets, please contact Ms. Dorothy Bryant or any member of the local branch. Mrs. Kathy McGill, branch secretary. The Reverend Isaac Owens is branch president. The Mount Zion First African Baptist Church conference call scheduled Sunday morning at 10 a.m. Prayer Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 12 noon. Bible study each Wednesday at 5 p.m. The call-in number is 339-209-6419. The call-in number 339-209-6419 for the Mount Zion First African Baptist Church. Deacon Joe Wedges, Chairman of Deacons, Dr. Dan James III, Pastor. The Gethsemane Baptist Church invites everyone to worship with them each Sunday at 10:30 a.m. Mother Mary Butler, Church Mother, Deacon Johnny Wilson, Chairman of Deacons, and the Reverend Cecil Straughter is the pastor. The New Grove Baptist Church invites everyone to worship with them each Sunday, Sunday school at 9:15 a.m., worship service at 10 a.m. Face covering is required. Sister Letha Askew, church clerk and trustee, Deacon Alonzo Jones, Chairman of Deacons, and the Reverend W. Wilson, pastor. The Beautiful Zion Baptist Church annual Men and Women's Day. The Beautiful Zion Baptist Church invites everyone to worship with them each Sunday at 11 a.m. Mother Grace Patrick, Church Mother, the Reverend Lorinda Ray is the pastor. The Greater Gum Creek Baptist Church invites everyone to worship with them each Sunday at 10:30 a.m. Mother Norma Solomon, Church Mother, Deacon Lonnie Hoggerbrook, chairman of deacons, and the Reverend Joseph Hoggerbrook is the pastor. You're invited to worship with the Greater Morris Tabernacle Baptist Church today with Sunday school at 9 a.m. with the superintendent, Deacon John Stubbs and Deacon Donald Talbert in charge. Morning worship at 9:30 a.m. Deacon Kenneth Smith, program chairman, Mother Mary Butler, church mother, Deacon Tommy Ford, chairman of deacons, and Dr. K.M. Williams is the pastor. Friends, that conclude our announcements for this morning, and we pray that you would govern yourselves accordingly. And now for dedication. Our first selection this morning is dedicated to the following: in loving memory of Mrs. Annie C. Telfair Hollis, who departed this life December 4th, 2018. Dedication requested by Mrs. Vivian Telfair and past Chief Augusta C. Telfair Jr., her beloved grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and the entire family, gone but not forgotten. In loving memory of Mr. Cleotis Davis, who would have celebrated his birthday December 6th, dedication requested by the Davis and Manning family, gone but not forgotten. In loving memory of United States Army veteran Mr. Bobby Lee Johnson, who departed this life December 7th, 2012, dedication requested by his beloved mother, Mrs. Annette Stembridge, and the entire family, gone but not forgotten. In loving memory of our beloved Mrs. Jerusha Hobbs, our Big Auntie, who would have celebrated her birthday December 11th, dedication requested by the Manning and Hobbs family. Precious memory lingers still. In loving memory of Mr. C.J. Wellens, who departed this life, dedication requested by the Wellens family, gone but not forgotten. In loving memory of Mrs. Odessa Denard, who would have celebrated her birthday December 12th, dedication requested by the Cobb, Hardeman, and Perkins family. Precious memory lingers still. In loving memory of Mr. John L. Colson, dedication requested by the Colson and Dennis family, gone but not forgotten. In loving memory of Mrs. Sheila Pickens Barbara, dedication requested by the Barbara, Pickens, and Scurry family, gone but not forgotten. In loving memory of Mrs. Gladys Williams, who would have celebrated her birthday December 13th, dedication requested by her children, her grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, gone but not forgotten. In loving memory of Mr. Emmett James Billings, who would have celebrated his birthday December 15th, dedication requested by his beloved wife, Mrs. Janie Rue Billings, then the children, grandchildren, and the entire family. Pause and remember the life of Mr. Emmett Jane Billings, gone but not forgotten. Our first selection this morning is dedicated to the following. Happy birthday to Miss Renee Ford, who is celebrating her birthday today, Sunday, December 10th, dedication requested by her beloved family. Happy birthday to Miss Gabriella Ford, who will celebrate her birthday Wednesday, December 13th, dedication requested by her beloved family. Special birthday wishes goes out to our friend and brother, Brother Kelvin Pless of Americus, Georgia, and host of morning TV Sunday morning program, WDC in Americus, Georgia, who will be celebrating his birthday on Wednesday, December 13th, dedication requested by his beloved wife, Mrs. Deborah Pless, the entire family, and the staff of the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Says, happy birthday to our friend and brother, the Brother Kelvin Pless of Americus, Georgia. Happy birthday, Brother Pless, and many, many more. Happy birthday to our dear friend, Miss Doretha Didell, who will be celebrating her birthday Friday, December 15th. And also happy birthday to her beloved husband, Mr. Silence Didell, who will celebrate his birthday Wednesday, December 19th. Dedication requested by their beloved children and grandchildren. Happy birthday to Mrs. Doretha Didell, who will celebrate her birthday Friday, December 15th, and her husband, Mr. Silence Didell, on Wednesday, December 19th. God bless you. Happy birthday to Miss Mary Reese, who will be celebrating her birthday Saturday, December 16th. Dedication requested by our beloved husband, Deacon Jake Reese, all of the children and grandchildren. Happy birthday, Miss Mary Reese, on Saturday, December 16. And happy birthday to Miss Sharon Butts, who will be celebrating her birthday Saturday, December 16. Dedication requested by her beloved family. Our first selection this morning is dedicated to the following: Deacon James Smith and family, Deacon Henry King of the Gethsemane Baptist Church, Deacon George Jordan and family of Vienna, Georgia, Mr. and Mrs. Harry Henderson and family, Miss Gloria Lester and family, Mother Grace Patrick and family, Mother Lenora McNeil and family, Mr. Willie James Perry and family, Mr. and Mrs. Willie B. Barnes and family, Vienna, Georgia, Mrs. Willie B. Brown and family, Miss Beatrice Walken family, Miss Gracie Walken family, Mrs. Shirley Pearl Walken family, the Reverend Revis McLaren and family, Deacon and Mrs. Oscar James and family, Mr. and Mrs. Wilbert Whitehead and family, Mr. Larry Collier and family, Mr. Charles Collier and family, Mr. and Mrs. Carl Henry and family, Mrs. George Marchman and family, the Fred Haddock family of Dooley County, Mr. Dobie Peacock and family, Mrs. Charlie Mae Peacock and family, Deacon and Mrs. Henry Peacock Sr. and family, Vienna, Georgia, Mr. and Mrs. Henry Peacock Jr. and family, Mrs. Annie Lewis and family, the family of the late Mother Pearlie Mae Perry of Vienna, Georgia, Mrs. Ethel Perry and family, the Harry Yell family and family, the J.B. Kendrick family of Unadilla, Georgia, Mrs. Corrine Bell Smith and family, Deacon and Mrs. David Leary and family, Deacon and Mrs. Walter Leary and family, Mrs. Bobby Brown and family, Mrs. Pauline Bryan and family, Mrs. Carrie McGee and family, the family of the late Reverend Walter Carter of Vienna, Georgia, Mrs. Evelyn Green and family, Miss Shirley Killings and family, Dr. George Cleveland and family, Mr. Willie Cooper and family, Mr. and Mrs. Tony Thomas and family, Mrs. Abby Bevins and family, the Martin family, Mr. and Mrs. Willie Jordan and families, Mary Nell Lundy and family, Mrs. Virginia Hill Montfrey and family, the family of the late Pastor Kathy Griffin and the Trials of Faith Church of Vienna, Georgia, Mrs. Georgia Bryan and family, Mrs. Bessie Byram and families, Paula Hayes and families, Anna Armstrong and family, Miss Pearlie Wallace and family, Mr. and Mrs. Willie Green and family, Miss Rosa Crane and family, Mr. William Green and family, Mr. James Lester and family, the Emerson family, Mrs. Willie Mae Cobb and family, Mr. and Mrs. Lynn Thomas and family, Church Mother Atline Lofton of the Little Rock Baptist Church of Araby, Georgia, Mrs. Eddie Mathis and families, Leslie Williams and family, Deacon and Mrs. Lonnie Anderson and family, Deacon Raymond Anderson and families, Corrine West and family, Mr. and Mrs. Sammy Lewis and family, Mrs. Margaret Whitehead and family, Mr. and Mrs. Ernie Cheney and family, Deacon Johnny Perry and family, Mrs. Vera Perry and family, Mother Mary Benjamin and family, Mrs. Leela Lewis and family, Mr. Homer Swain and family, Mr. Kenneth Lester and family, Mr. and Mrs. James Bryant Jr. and family, Mr. James Bryant Sr. and family. Our first selection for this morning. Mr. Xavier Alexander Sims, age 27, of 178 Hopper Subdivision, Americas, Georgia, died Thursday, December 7th at his residence in Americas, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Xavier Alexander Sims, age 27, will be announced at a later date pending the completion of the arrangements. Mrs. Bernadine Green King, age 61, of 3338 Beauty Berry Way, Lithonia, Georgia, formerly of Americas, Georgia, died Wednesday, December 6th at the Emory Hilldale Hospital in Lithonia, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Bernadine Green King, age 61, will be held Saturday, December 16th at 10 a.m., graveside at Eastview Cemetery in Americas, Georgia. The Reverend Susie Tatum will officiate. The public visitation will be Friday, December 15th from 1 until 5 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Mr. DeQuavius Tremaine Cleckley, age 20, of 1366 Dayspring Trace, Lawrenceville, Georgia, died Saturday, November 11th at Wellstar North Fulton Hospital in Lawrenceville, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. DeQuavius Tremaine Cleckley, age 20, will be announced at a later date pending the recovery of his beloved mother. Mrs. Shamika LaShawn Reese Hardiman, age 45, of 306 West 17th Avenue, Cordele, Georgia, died Sunday, December 3rd at the Chris Regional Hospital in Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Shamika LaShawn Reese Hardiman, age 45, will be announced at a later date pending the completion of the arrangements. Mrs. Barbara Ann Owens Peterson, age 75, of Rochester, New York, died Wednesday, November 29th in Rochester, New York. The funeral service for Mrs. Barbara Ann Owens Peterson, age 75, will be announced at a later date pending the completion of the arrangements. Mrs. Gwendolyn Reed Sellers, age 64, of 237 Irvingville Road, Abbeville, Georgia, died Friday, December 8th at Atrium Navison Health in Macon, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Gwendolyn Reed Sellers, age 64, will be announced at a later date pending the completion of the arrangements. Mrs. Carlita Elaine Lewis, age 61, of 1317 Drayton Road, Cordele, Georgia, died Saturday, December 9th at the Piedmont Medical Center in Macon, Georgia. The funeral service for Miss Carlita Elaine Lewis, age 61, will be announced at a later date pending the completion of the arrangements. Mrs. Alberta Brown Trotman of 302 West 15th Avenue, Cordele, Georgia, died Saturday, December 9th on her 97th birthday at her residence. The funeral service for Mother Alberta Brown Trotman, age 97, will be announced at a later date pending the completion of the arrangements. Beloved Pastor, the Reverend Leonard Boston, age 76, of 951 Pleasant Valley Road, Vienna, Georgia, died Saturday, December 9th at the Chris Regional Hospital in Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for beloved Pastor The Reverend Leonard Boston, age 76, will be announced at a later date pending the completion of the arrangements. The J.W. Williams funeral directors serving Cordele and Vienna are in charge of each of these arrangements during this week. Our next and final selection for this morning is dedicated to the bereaved family whose loved ones was laid to rest during the past week. The family of United States Army veteran Mr. Sammy John Balaam Sr. of Atlanta, Georgia, formerly of Wilcox County. This selection is dedicated to the bereaved families whose loved ones will be laid to rest during this week. The family, Mr. Xavier Alexander Sims of Americus, Georgia. The family, Mrs. Bernadine Green King of Lithonia, Georgia, formerly of Americus, Georgia. The family of Mr. DeQuavius Tremont Cleckley of Lawrenceville, Georgia. The family of Mrs. Shamika LaShawn Reese Hardeman of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mrs. Barbara Ann Owens Peterson of Rochester, New York. The family of Mrs. Gwendolyn Reed Sellers of Abbeville, Georgia. The family of Mrs. Carlita Elaine Lewis of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mother Alberta Brown Trotman of Cordele, Georgia. And the family of beloved pastor, the Reverend Leonard Boston of Vienna, Georgia. This election is dedicated to all of the sick and shut-in, to all patients in the local and surrounding hospitals, nursing homes, and rehabilitation centers, to our beloved ministers and their devoted family members, to all retired educators, to the men and women serving in our armed forces, both stateside and abroad, to all veterans, and to everyone who listens to our program on each Sunday morning. It's a pleasure for us to bring it to you. Our program goes out in memory of our past president, Dr. Napoleon Williams, to my wife, Mrs. Calandra Wilkerson Parker, to my son, Jai Wilkerson Parker, to my mother-in-law, Mrs. Billy Ann Hall and family, to my brother, retired Chief Master Sergeant Norman F. Dexter, and his wife, Dr. Gwendolyn Mike Singh Dexter, and our grandson, Noble. This selection goes out to my sister, Mrs. Patsy Jackson, and her husband, Mr. Jim Jackson of Cordele, Georgia. Selection goes out to my niece, Mrs. Vera Mathis, and hope she's feeling well this morning, and to Mrs. Florine Manning and family. Goes out to my nephew, Deacon Kenneth Smith, program chairman of the Greater Morris Tabernacle Baptist Church, and our pastor, Dr. K.M. Williams, and his wife, Sister Kathy Williams. And again, to each and everyone who listens to our program on each Sunday morning. God bless you this second Sunday in December 2023.
Thank you for joining us this morning. We hope you've enjoyed our program. Tune in again on next Sunday morning. In your time of need, contact the competent, capable, and dependable staff at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home.